Good evening. My name is Lance Gardner. I'm a producer here with KQED Live. KQED Live is the events arm of KQED Public Media, and we are in the business of putting on exciting, engaging programs for you here at 2601 Mariposa in San Francisco and online at youtube.com/KQED Live. Thank you so much for joining us here and for joining us at home. Before we begin, I want to let you know where you can find all of our exciting programs. Just go to kqed.org/live to see our full slate of programming for this quarter. I also want to thank all of our season sponsors. We have 4 amazing season sponsors who make it possible for us to do what we're doing. They are Comcast Business, Asian Art Museum, SF Symphony, and Berkeley Rep. And tonight, we have a special giveaway. You may have seen that we had a mobile quiz up on the screen. If you scan that QR code and took the quiz, you are automatically entered to win some very exciting KQED notebooks and maybe even a tote bag. I have the names of the winners right here in front of me. Are you ready? Can I get a drum roll from everybody, please? Winner number 1, Shiv Garg. Can you raise your hand, please? All right, congratulations. Right down here, we have a winner. Next winner, one more drum roll. Evan Hoppin. All right, Evan, congratulations, way to go. And final drum roll, please, the biggest one yet. William Walker. William Walker, where are you? Raise your hand. William, there's William right there. Congratulations. Thank you for coming out. When you come to KQED, you are always a winner. So now I would like you to sit back and relax and welcome the hosts of tonight's program, Marisa Lagos and Scott Schaefer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lance. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Welcome to this live edition of Political Breakdown. I'm Marisa Lagos.
And I'm Scott Schaefer. And we're delighted to have with us tonight San Francisco Mayor London Breed. As you may know, she grew up in public housing in the Western Addition, not far from where she works now in City Hall.
But a world away in many ways. So she's here to talk about that journey and also the state of San Francisco in 2022. Please join us in welcoming Mayor London Breed. All right.
There we go.
Hot seat.
Uh-huh.
She's in it now. She can't escape. No. Well, Madam Mayor, thank you so much for being here. We want to talk a little bit about your bio, as we said, but we thought we'd open with a broader question, which is you've been mayor about 4 years now, including the final year of Ed Lee's term. How's it going? What's the best part? What's the worst part? Do you like the job?
Well, okay. Where do I start?
Yeah.
First of all, I never would have thought I'd be in the midst of a global pandemic. I'm sure no one thought something like this was possible. So I was having fun, getting ready, doing my thing, and all of a sudden, bam, here we go. Yeah. So a lot of the time that I've been mayor has been disconnected from people. I'm a people's person. I thrive from being around people, going to events and the excitement of the city. And there are a lot of things that I didn't anticipate being mayor that I had to deal with, but that's the job. You adapt, you adjust, and you do what's necessary. I think on most days I like the job. It depends. It's a hard job, but it can be really, really rewarding. I met this person who grew up in San Francisco, born and raised, and had been homeless for 20 years. And he now has a safe, affordable place to call home. And he was telling me about his sister and trying to reconnect with his family and the excitement. And I think this is what we're making possible, right? We're helping people, we're changing lives. That doesn't get as much attention as, sadly, some of the challenges that we see on the streets, but I get a firsthand look at that. And that feels good. It's rewarding to think about how we think about programming, how we make decisions, and how it impacts people's lives, because I want to see things happen. I want to see things work. And being in city government in this bureaucracy has really tested my patience for getting results. It's not what I thought it was going to be.
How is it different?
I think it's different in that you can't make things happen as fast as you want them to.
Like, did you think as a supervisor it would be easier as mayor to?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
probably did because I'll tell you, when Ed Lee was mayor, you probably remember he didn't initially support me. And when I became a member of the Board of Supervisors, we worked closely together. We developed a really great relationship. And when I wanted to get things done for my district, he was very supportive, and we had a great working relationship. But sadly, a part of these roles includes politics, and things can get quite nasty when that gets in the way of progress and what you're trying to do to serve the people you represent.
Well, we want to talk about some of the policies and issues in politics, but I'm curious, you became mayor under tragic circumstances. You were president of the Board of Supervisors. Ed Lee died suddenly, unexpectedly. You were suddenly the mayor, the interim, the acting mayor. What's the best advice and the worst advice you got in those first hours?
I think probably some of the best advice that I got is when things seem to be overwhelming and it's hard to make a decision, take a moment, meditate, and reflect, and make sure that you're making a decision from the right place. So I was very much appreciative of that advice that I got from a friend of mine. Worst advice, there's always worst advice. Everyone has a lot of things to say, but every now and then you'll get some good advice in between all of the recommendation. But what I love, though, ultimately about the city is everyone wanted to be a part of helping. People wanted to help make things better or help support me, making sure that whether they voted for me or not, it wasn't about that. It was about what can we do to support you because that supports the city. And I really have appreciated that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you came to this. You grew up in public housing, Plaza East and Western Addition, as we mentioned, and you have 4 siblings raised by your grandmother. We actually have a photo of you and your grandmother when you were very little. Very sweet photo.
Do you remember that photo? Do you remember?
I do. We stayed at 1133 Laguna, apartment 2403, on the 4th floor, and I remember, I can even see the halls right now. But there's 6 of us total.
Oh, okay.
But my grandmother raised initially 4 of us, and then later my sister went to live with my mother when she came home, and then she ended up raising 3 of us. So it's kind of complicated.
Yeah.
But
tell us about your grandmother, though. I know she was a huge force in your life.
yeah, she was a used force for certain. This was back in the day when you can get whoopings and get away with it. I got a lot of whoopings.
What did you do that
I did
brought
everything.
that out?
What didn't I do? If I talked back, there was a whooping. If I didn't come in the house in a timely manner, when it's dark, you're in the house. If you're not in the house, Ms. Brown did not mess around. So it was, if I didn't want to wash dishes, it's like, oh, you gonna wash the dishes. You're good. She was just very strict, very, Southern. She's from Texas, and she's very Southern. And also, she knew the challenges of the community we were in. She knew the challenges of some of the things that my mom got into as well. And so she was very, very protective, very honest with me about the family and some of the things that were going on, because she never wanted me to go down that path. She didn't want me out on the streets selling dope or prostituting or doing some things that were, really problematic. She was a church-going lady. She made us go to church. Oh my goodness.
What church did you guys go to?
First Union Baptist Church. I got baptized there, and we had to wear our pantyhose, and you can't go into church bare leg. She was serious, So even today, I'm scared to kind of walk into City Hall without pantyhose on. But I do every now and then. I'm like, oop, I might get in trouble. Yeah. But she was she was a force. She was not just a force in our family. She was good to people in the community. People still remember she would pierce a lot of people's ears If you were hungry, like if you knocked on her door, she would feed you like whatever she had. So a lot of people remember my grandmother and really appreciate how she supported them in their lives.
You've been very open about your childhood and your youth. You had a brother and he struggled with addiction. He is now serving a long prison sentence. You had a sister who died of an overdose. You had a cousin who was shot and killed by the police. How does all of that, we're all affected by our upbringing and the circumstances we're raised in. How do you think all of that affects the way you think about politics and policy?
Well, it's one of the main reasons why I got into politics, because of all the things that happened in my family. A lot of the hurt, the pain, the struggles, and wanting to see something change. Because I think, what if, right? What if opportunities existed where my brother, my sister, my cousin, they were just in a different situation, where they were doing well in life and pursuing their education or opening their own business and not caught up in the streets the way that they were. So I think about that part and wanting to help invest in young people, which is why I started Opportunities for Hall, to make sure that every high school kid in San Francisco has a paid internship. So money, they learn skills, they get exposed to things, but like money is not a barrier. I don't want money to be a barrier to opportunity. With my cousin in particular, I remember my aunt was going through chemo for breast cancer, and when we found out about it and tried to get information how she was treated, was really, when I think about it, it's hard to just, feel like, your son just died and you're being treated like a criminal and you're going through chemo, right? So one of the first things I was proud to be able to do as a member of the Board of Supervisors is to pass legislation that because you have to ask, we didn't know anything about independent investigation, this and that. We didn't know anything about what to do. And so the fact that it wasn't automatic was a problem. So the legislation was to make sure that automatically, officer involved shooting, officer draws their gun, what have you, there's an automatic independent investigation. You shouldn't have to ask for that. We should get to the bottom of it to understand what actually happened.
And now there's state law in a similar vein.
And we did it here in San Francisco first. So a lot of my experiences are what shaped, who I am, how I make policy, but also how unapologetic I am about the decisions I make, because most of the times the frustration I have with the people who want to change policy, they have experience, they empathize, they may see something that they don't like and they want to change, that's fine. But when you've not experienced and been through it, the least you could do is listen. Like listen to people who have had these struggles and understand what they went through before you become the savior of people when you have no idea what it feels like to live this way. So a lot of my experience is why I make decisions and why I'm not afraid to stand up for what I believe in, even though it can be controversial and not everyone's going to like you for it.
Yeah. We're going to talk about policing and public safety later, but what you're talking about strikes me because I've done a lot of reporting this year on particularly Black mothers and the gaps in our system when it comes to violence and our victim system, which has typically excluded a lot of people in communities like the one you grew up in. I'm curious, apart from the criminal justice angle, like what do you see as what's important after, something horrible like what happened to your cousin happens in a family? Like, does the city, the state need to be stepping up more with resources well beyond, just public safety?
Well, I think part of it is to understand what happened. That's a minimum, to make sure that there is some sort of clarity from an independent investigation. And then depending on the outcome of that, really looking at what are the things that can be done, because the family is hurt by this. And when you think about the mental illness, the challenges that exist there, making sure that access to resources exists so that the pain and suffering of an incident of this nature doesn't linger and create more problematic situations for a family in the future. So I think there are ways in which we as a city have really invested in mental health. Can we do more? Yes. It's been very challenging to have culturally competent mental health services for people, because in the Black community in particular, there is a stigma attached to getting help, right? And so getting help and then medications and other things that come with that potentially. And I think that part of it is we have to make sure we're educating people about this and making it more comfortable, not just with the Black community. I mean, this pandemic has impacted all of us on so many different levels. Our children and their inability to socialize because they've been away from one another in schools, and our seniors who have been isolated and get depressed, and sometimes dementia, gets a lot worse for them if they're already developing it. So it's really looking at mental illness and not attaching it with negativity or with the fact that, like, oh, she's seeing a shrink, she's crazy. We have to get rid of those myths and normalize it, similar to how we take care of our bodies, right? Taking care of our mind is equally important, and that's something that I care about very deeply.
Well, then there's been a lot of research done around, ACEs, all the violence, the adverse trauma that kids are put through, and I'm sure you witnessed a lot of that. You escaped somehow. You got to UC Davis, and we have a photograph of you. I think this is from your college years.
That was in front of the projects I lived in.
Yeah. Rocking that flannel shirt.
I thought I was cute.
Were you in marching band, I think, weren't you? How did you get into marching band?
Well, in junior high, I was in, it wasn't a marching band, but I was in Mr. Martin's Ben Franklin Middle School advanced band. I was first chair until Peter Ng came through with his French horn, with his little extra lessons, bumped me out of first chair.
What instrument did you play?
I played French horn.
You played French horn.
Yeah, and so we were Diane Feinstein, she was mayor, we were her band, she bought us band sweaters, we played at City Hall. When the 49ers won the Super Bowl, we played at the Fairmont Hotel. Like, it was really cool to be in band. And that was junior high school. And then when I got to high school, I was in the band just for, my freshman year. I thought I was a little too cool until I found out you can get into the football games free if you were in the band. So that's why I stayed with it freshman year in high school.
Do you think that or other experiences are one of the reasons that you were able to get out of the projects and go to college?
I think that it's a combination of things. And so, for example, like I was a challenging student. I got into fights, I talked back, I had real disciplinary issues. And in band, because it was kind of cool to be in band at Ben Franklin. And so I wanted to be in band because like the older kids were in band. And the first day I was talking, and Mr. Martins made me write lines on the chalkboard with chalk. Have you ever written lines on a chalkboard? That's hard, 100 lines. I will not talk in class. I remember.
Like Bart Simpson.
It was like old school.
Oh, no, It was serious. And then afterwards, after I finished my lines, because I had to stay after school, and they had to call my grandmother.
That probably didn't go over well either.
Oh, no, I got a whooping. Mr. Martin sat down and talked to me, and we developed this great friendship. And he said, look, I believe in you. And a lot of my teachers were like that. They were, I believe in you, but you can't talk in class. You got to respect. And so I didn't want to disappoint him. So even when I got in trouble in other classes, they were like, well, maybe I should talk to Mr. Martins. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, don't talk to Mr. Martins. Okay, I'll be quiet.
You went to UC Davis, and you actually began, I think, majoring in chemistry.
Yes.
And then you switched to political science. Like, what did you imagine yourself doing with a chemistry degree?
I think, so I was in 10th grade when a representative from UC Davis came to Miss Luke's class, U.S. History. And I can't believe I'm remembering all this stuff, but
I know, it's impressive,
but it's certain things you just remember in your life. And so Miss Luke's class, 10th grade, U.S. History, or was it 11th grade? One of those. Anyway, it was, I think, 11th grade. But UC Davis representative came and talked about all these requirements, SAT score, ACT, grades. Now, I got good grades because I was smart, but I didn't really know about college that way. Like, I didn't understand what that meant.
Navigating all
My
that.
grandmother was just very proud that in the South, she graduated from high school, and she wanted me to graduate from high school. That was important to her. So that was what I was going to do, and then probably go work and do something. And then I decided, well, I want to go to college. That seems like it's fun. And because they showed us the pictures, and it was, you know, it was some good looking guys in the brochure. It's like, that looks fun to me. But then I started working really hard, and I got like, for my junior, like at that point I got like straight A's, and I had AP classes and all this stuff. And I was applying for all these schools, and I just applied for everything I qualified for, including scholarships, because I had no money. Like I was like, oh, how am I going to pay for all this? And I ended up getting a chemistry scholarship, the first at the National Association for the Advancement of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers. They were kind of based out of Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and it was the first year they gave a scholarship, and I won. I won the scholarship, and I was like, okay, well, I guess it was like $5,000 a year. I was like, I'm a chemistry major. So that's what happened. And I started getting into chemistry. I worked at Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and I worked on oil shale research, trying to create artificial crude oil and crystallizations, but I was a clumsy chemist, spilling methylene chloride and all kinds of stuff all over the lab. And I just wasn't patient enough for chemistry. I really tried. I worked really hard, did the coursework, met a lot of great friends who still were in the sciences, and just decided last minute, you know what, I'm tired of this chemistry stuff. It's too much focus. It's too hard. These formulas are making me crazy. And I just kind of switched last minute, but it was a great experience.
Yeah.
So you come back to San Francisco after your degree, you worked in city government, and then for, I think, a decade, you ran the African American Cultural Complex in the Western Addition. And you know, I know you did a lot of work there to not just encourage young people to, you know, be part of the arts. I remember you talking about bringing a social worker in there.
Oh, yeah.
And then, which is, you know, the spot from which you ran for supervisor. So can you just talk a little bit about that period and sort of what you continue to carry with you from that? Because that must have been very different than being part of the neighborhood growing up there.
Yeah, when I went to Davis, for example, like the fact that I was at Davis was a big deal. So people from the neighborhood would always come and spend a night at wherever I lived in Davis, and, you know, sleep on the floor with blankets and everything. And because, you know, like there were people who were dying, funerals on a regular basis, and I wanted the people. I'm like, if they could only see this. Like, this is amazing. Like, all we do is study and hang out and have a good time, and we're growing intellectually. Like, all this, I invited as many people as I could to come to Davis because I wanted them to see what's possible, and I wanted better for my community, and I didn't want to be the only one. I felt really lonely because I love the people that I grew up with. And the violence was so much so that so many of those folks ended up dying. And one of the reasons why I am not the biggest fan of even going to funerals to this day is because of how many funerals I had to go to over the years. It's really hard. I mean, we're talking about young people my age, right, at the time, in teens and not even able to make it to 20 years old. So I wanted to come back to the community and do something to impact the community, and I got involved in everything that I could get involved. I was doing voter registration drives with the NAACP. I was, you know, wherever I could volunteer and help and register and educate voters, that was something I was working on. And I was a mentor to a lot of young girls who wanted to go to college. In fact, you know, some of them ended up getting masters and PhDs and all kinds of things. And so I just really focused on being a part of the community. But when I came back, I was working, Willie Brown was mayor, so I was an intern, so I needed to be able to pay the bills. So I was working, initially working at Wells Fargo Bank. Before that in college, I babysat and cleaned houses and did whatever it took. So I didn't want to be super poor. I wanted to at least be able to pay my bills, and didn't want my grandmother. I mean, she only has Social Security. She wasn't getting welfare anymore, food stamps, because we were all adults. And so she just didn't have money to help us. So I didn't want to be this burden on her. So I did whatever I had to do. I helped support and help her. But I ended up working for Mayor Brown and doing a lot of community work from there. And he ended up, because the African American Art and Culture Complex was having a lot of challenges, sent me there to be the director. And the violence that I grew up with was now happening to the kids of the people that I grew up with. So it was like, wait a minute, I would see a kid walk through the door, I know your daddy, I know your mom, like just looking at their faces, I know who their parents were. And a lot of the work I did was I wanted their lives to be better. I wanted their lives to change. And that's why, even though we were an arts organization, I brought in, I raised money to bring in a social worker, to bring in job training. We would sit at these computers and put together these resumes and other things with the kids. And so I came back to the community because I wanted things to improve, and it was a lot of work, a lot of work.
Yeah, we are going to take audience questions later, so you should have some notepads or little index cards. So if you have a question, write it down and pass it to the aisle, and somebody will collect that. So much of what you're dealing with as mayor now, you mentioned the pandemic, which isn't over, but is public safety. And there's a lot of things to talk about with regard to that. But one of the things that happened right after the pandemic was George Floyd was murdered. Black Lives Matter came to the fore. And you had protesters at your house in the Haight-Ashbury, or in the lower Haight, I guess you'd call it. And I remember you noting that most of them are white, and they're out in front yelling at you, telling you what to do. And I'm wondering, based on the life that you've had and what you've seen in terms of poverty and crime and all the rest, what do you think you know that people on the outside kind of yelling at you and other policymakers don't know or don't understand or just get wrong?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that probably bothered me the most is none of them have had to deal with the challenges of what mostly Black men have had to deal with law enforcement. Like they are fortunate enough that they probably will never have to, because the kinds of things that I've seen in our community, and back then, mostly we had a lot of people who were framed and arrested for things that they didn't do, and there was a lot of tension between our community and the police. But what they don't know is how hard in the Western Addition, when we had a lot of the violence and people being killed, how hard we worked with the police department, because many of these moms and families wanted justice. And we didn't want people terrorizing our community. Some of these people we knew and loved, but at the same time, we didn't want them to take somebody else's life, and we didn't want them to die either. It's so complicated. And if you don't understand it because you don't live in it, it's easy for you to go out there and say and tell somebody what to do when you never have to experience. You're fortunate enough to never have to experience it yourself.
But what do you think of the Black Lives Matter movement? Do you think it's too black and white when it comes to the police?
No, I think that lumping everybody who supports this movement into one category and saying they believe one thing or another is wrong. Because I think there are a lot of people who feel, I'm tired of being disrespected. As mayor, in some instances, there are a number of incidents that I've encountered that I know I'm treated differently because I'm Black. And
can you think of one?
Give me a minute.
Okay.
Give me a minute, and I'll come up with one. Off the top of my head.
You can share.
Off the top of my head, I could tell you one. That the way I was treated as a woman, it's different too. As a woman as well, probably more so even.
Well, what happened to the board, you could say, when there was an interim mayor, but that's a whole other.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. But for me, it's really wanting to. It's not to say that people don't have a right to protest or to their opinions or feel the way they feel because they might be tired of seeing something. It's how you go about it. It's how you go about it. And part of it is, do you even talk to do you even know somebody who's been impacted? Have you ever even had the conversation? Like the debate we had around tasers, right? So at one point I was like, I don't want another weapon. We need to deal with reforms. That was my focus. And all of a sudden I'm getting, phone calls and conversation from Black men I grew up with who are like, wait a minute, we support tasers, right? And so I had to listen to that conversation from people who are gonna be the most impacted. John Burris, who's an attorney who's represent a lot of people who family members have been killed by the police, he's like, I support tasers too, and I'm, wanting to know why. It's like, more than likely, I'm gonna be the person at the other end, and I want an alternative. They didn't say it that way. I won't say it how they said it.
Nobody wants to get tased.
Yeah, no one wants to get tased, but it's like, I'd rather this than that. Like my friend's brother who was killed, sadly by BART police, he's like, the first thing he's like, why didn't they tase him? He was like, they're not coming back. And I'm not saying tasers are better or whatever, but everybody advocating, I would like to know one Black man who's advocating to support not using tasers, because I don't. So I think in my mind, I feel like I have to really respect the people that I even grew up with and their experiences and make decisions accordingly and not just stick to what I believe should not happen.
I mean, you're talking about, the challenges that many communities of color have faced with police. There's a lot of distrust there. And yet, I think you have been a very big sort of booster of our police department. You are very close to Chief Scott, who you appointed. And I think there's this dual thing where you have communities who distrust police because they feel in part that they have been victims of them. And then you also have a lot of people in San Francisco who don't trust the police because they don't think they're doing their job. I'm just curious how you think about that balance, because I think you probably find yourself on both sides of those conversations sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I must say, like I said, it goes back to the work that we did in the community with the police when we were experiencing some of the worst violence in our neighborhood's history, and developing relationships with officers to help resolve those issues and to keep our community safe. Now, the thing is, just like Black people don't want to be labeled as one thing, right? Police don't want to be labeled as one thing. And how is it fair just because they wear the uniform to say that one person that has done something maybe terrible all of a sudden is the representative for the entire department? Because I've seen police officers go above and beyond. My aunt who had mental challenges, they would go beyond and above and beyond to make sure she got home safely, or to call and check on her and to see how she's doing. I've seen that firsthand. I've seen a lot of different sides to it, but I also have seen the abuses, and I don't think it's fair to just basically say this is what it is. And as a mayor who is responsible for this department, I want to support and uplift those officers who put on the uniform every single day, who put their lives on the line, who want to serve and protect the people of San Francisco. But what I'm not going to do is say, just because there are others who aren't doing their job, or there are some who are doing their jobs in the wrong way, that all of a sudden I'm going to label the entire department a certain kind of way. And I don't think that's fair.
But you do want to have accountability, not just for the police, but for every department that you oversee, or in the city. And I'm wondering, how does it affect you when you see, as so many people have seen, these videos of police not responding, to a certain crime, or just the statistics on auto break-ins, where I think there's an arrest in 1% of the. So that, I know that there were issues about the DA. We can get into that, but with the police, how do you? What kind of conversations do you?
Well, I'm not going to talk about those conversations because, mostly because.
How would you characterize them?
Of course, I'm not happy. And not only that, I want to make sure that those individuals are held accountable. But what I will say is, especially since we've gotten a new district attorney, things have changed a lot in terms of the number of arrests that have been made for people who break the law in San Francisco.
But why is that? The police can make the arrest regardless of what happens. I feel like it's a weird thing to say, I mean, they don't make the laws.
Yeah.
They're supposed to enforce them. So why not? Why would that change depending
So
on who's
let
in
me
the
just say
DAC?
this. This may not be right, but for example, there was an individual who was arrested 6 times and was pretty much released every time he was arrested, maybe not even being held for over a day, right? So I think that there was a lot of discouragement. And it was like, why arrest this person when they're going to get out and nothing's going to happen? That's not right either, to be clear. So those were the kinds of scenarios we were dealing with, and a lot of the frustration I had and conversations I had with the chief to try and deal with that component of things. But things have definitely changed as a result of having a new DA.
Do you think the police purposely undermined the former DA?
You know, I'm not going to guess what someone did or didn't do. I can only speak to what I tried to do in providing additional resources that were used for the DA's budget that were communicated to me that they would be used differently than they were, which was pretty frustrating because it didn't matter how I felt personally about the DA. I wanted the DA to be successful. I wanted to make sure that there was a relationship that existed and that we could put the politics to the side, but sadly, we just had a lot of disagreements, and that was frustrating, but it should never stop you as someone who raises your right hand and you take an oath, you swear to serve and protect, and if you do that, you can't, deliberately try to undermine someone because you don't like who that person is. You have to do your responsibility based on the oath that you take. And I think if that were the case, is really unfortunate. And in some cases, some of those people should not be wearing the uniform.
You had a press conference today with the police chief and with the DA and saying it was about drugs, but it was about how the cooperation that's now happening. And yet, there was a couple of articles in the Chronicle by Heather Knight about this creepy, scary guy, Bill Hobbs. They have his name, they have his picture. He's assaulted and harassed many women. And some of those women feel like the police department hasn't taken it seriously enough. There hasn't been an arrest. They talked to the DA down in San Mateo who said, well, here's how I would build a case. Now, I know a judge dismissed one of those charges, and so it's not all the DA or the police, but how do you feel about that when you hear a story like that? Because he seems like a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, and that has happened with a lot of people who are in that category, but also, sadly, some people who struggle with addiction and mental illness. There was a gentleman in the Noe Valley area who, unfortunately, people were saying over and over again that this person is a ticking time bomb until it got to a point where they assaulted and killed someone. And the sad reality is there are a lot of different layers of laws that we have to follow. I know people are like, I don't want excuses, I want results. Well, we need to make some changes to our laws. We can't keep saying we want something different, and then when we propose changes to those laws, everyone's like, well, I don't want to take away anybody's rights if they didn't do anything.
But what change would be necessary to put him behind
I
bars?
think that part of it is, mental illness and the challenges around mental illness are real. And I think right now with the conservatorship law that Scott Wiener helped to get passed in the state, before we can actually even begin a proceeding, you have to have at least 8 5150s where you're committed for 72 hours in 1 year. And that's just that threshold needs to be lowered. I think it needs to be lowered. And
Are you optimistic about the care courts proposal from the governor?
I think that the challenge is we need more.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be bold. And, I think that not just the people of San Francisco, but others are ready for a significant overhaul of how we address people who struggle with mental illness. And we need to have an honest conversation about some people who can get help and maybe be stabilized and be better and get okay. And there are others who need to be in a locked mental health facility, who sometimes are violent. They may not, jail is probably not the place for them. But we need to have these honest conversations because they're like, we don't want to go back to, the mental health facilities and committing people against their will. Like, we're in a different place now. We have, evidence-based, diagnoses of some of these particular illnesses. And I just think that there's a better way to address these, and we have to be comfortable enough with what might happen to someone who needs help. I mean, this man who I've known for many, many years, elderly, but rode his bike around, gave out flowers to all the women, lived in a senior home, and he started to develop dementia and he started to get violent. And we tried to do so many things to get him into the right place, and we couldn't force him to take his medication. We couldn't help get him stabilized. I mean, he's homeless right now on the streets of San Francisco. So why is that okay that he has rights to say, I don't want help? We know he has dementia. We know he's never been this kind of person before. So he needs to be cared for differently than just he has rights and he can do what he wants because he says he wants to.
Right. Well, I want to talk about sort of the other side of that, which is drug use. And as Scott mentioned, you had this news conference today. Nearly 1,700 people have overdosed in San Francisco since 2020. And you got a lot of attention last year when you said we need to be less tolerant of all the bullshit that has destroyed our city.
Quote.
I didn't mean to curse on TV.
Yeah, was that spontaneous? And who are you talking? What are you talking about? What is the BS?
I think that came about because I was angry. I was frustrated. I had met with all these families who, many were immigrant families, who were telling me stories and in tears through an interpreter, telling me these stories about their encounters, which consisted of violence. And in fact, I have a friend that I grew up with.
You're talking about in the Tenderloin specifically, yeah.
I have a friend that I grew up with who, his son grew up going to the cultural center, and he was chased, held down, and shot and killed, and it's on video. There's other friends I know, people I grew up with, stabbed, right? These, like, they're like, London, this is what happened. Like, they're telling me these stories. They're dealing with this, right? And these are not people who are afraid. These are like, minus the families with the kids, but these are people I grew up with who probably did time and been in the streets and everything else. And they're like, this is like nothing we've ever experienced. And the fact that kids have to live like this, the fact that this mom was knocked unconscious in front of her 6-year-old son and, you know, like her waking up son, I mean, just the stories. And I'm like, people are living like this every day in San Francisco.
Walks from City Hall.
Why is this okay? Why do people who deal drugs have more rights than people who try to get up and go to work every day and take their children to school?
Do they, though? Do they have more rights, or is that?
So I can give you an example. So unfortunately, and let's talk about the reality of the situation. There are, unfortunately, a lot of people who come from a particular country, come from Honduras, and a lot of the people who are dealing drugs happen to be of that ethnicity. And when a lot of the arrests have been made for people breaking the law, you have the public defender's office and staff from the public defender's office who are basically accusing and using the law to say you're racial profiling. You're racial profiling, right? And it's nothing racial profile about this. It's we all know it. It's the reality. It's what you see. It's what's out there. So it's not about racial profiling. It just so happens that this is the case. Just like when you look at disparities around things that are happening, this is just the reality. And so we have people advocating for folks who are selling fentanyl that's killing people. But what about the kid that got a hold of some fentanyl by accident and died? What about the families? What about the people who live there? So for me, we can't just, throw our hands up and say people have rights. Like, I am happy to give anybody an opportunity that wants to do something that doesn't consist of breaking the law. I'm happy to figure out ways in which we can make those kinds of connections which we've tried. It's been very, very difficult. But to just allow it, and that's why you see the increase in arrests. But
Talk about what you all talked about today and what you see, because it does seem that criminal justice policing is a big part of this, as is harm reduction.
Yeah, well, right now, for example, in the Tenderloin, we have a lot of folks who, people who have been involved in the criminal justice system who work for a program called Urban Alchemy. Some have, some haven't, but this is a second chance. They have a job, they have an opportunity, and they know the streets of San Francisco. They're out there trying to change. And in fact, they've been assaulted, right? Stabbed and shot and a couple of other things. So we have Urban Alchemy out there, because really it's about safe passage and making sure, we're eyes and ears on the streets. But even they were like, we need the police.
Yeah.
Like, especially after the last person was shot. It was like, we want to be out here, we want to be ambassadors, but we don't want to get in any violent altercations with people and get stabbed or get shot. That's not what we're here for. We're here to support the community. So things have changed a lot in what people want to see, but as you probably know, the police department is short 540 officers. We expect 200 academy classes in this fiscal year. Building up this department is going to take some time. So our ambassadors, our treatment programs for those who struggle with addiction, so that treatment is an alternative, and being out there and being consistent is going to be what we need to do.
The homeless problem is kind of a flip, the other side of the coin with drugs. I mean, they're very much related. There's a lot of overlap. Mayors going all the way back to Dianne Feinstein have dealt with homelessness. There was Beyond Shelter. There was navigation centers.
Care not cash.
Care not cash. You name it. Every mayor had a slogan, and here you are. And it's, to many people, it seems like either nothing has changed or in some cases it's worse. Is it a matter of like, yeah, we took 5,000 off, but 7,000 more came? Or like, where does it break down? Because it seems like San Francisco, with all of its compassion and its huge budget, $12, $13 billion, ought to be able to figure
It's not money. It's not about money. We, in fact, we're in the second year of spending $1 billion on homelessness. We saw in our last point in time count a 15% reduction in unsheltered homelessness and an overall reduction by 3.5% of homelessness. We saw this in San Francisco when no other Bay Area city saw a reduction, right? Hardly any city in the state of California saw this. So we saw it. But I think the issue that we're dealing with is, for example, we have people who are in these large encampments. And oftentimes, people who are in these encampments are people that we provide, in some cases, housing or a shelter bed to.
And they're not using them?
And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. Because, addiction is a tricky thing. Just because we provide you with a roof over your head doesn't mean you're going to go home every night. And the bigger issue here is how easy it is to get access to fentanyl on the streets, how easy it is, how inexpensive it is. And so it is important that we continue to do our aggressive work around arrest, but more importantly, around treatment options. So that when someone agrees, there's two ways. It's you're tired of it and you're going to ask for help. We got to be able to help, like treatment on demand, which we have a number of locations that do that, including a facility in the Mission kind of Valencia area that we just reopened after remodeling. But there also has to be when someone who's addicted to drugs commits a crime and we look at, the situation, jail is not the solution. How do we force that person into treatment like a Delancey Street or Health Right 360 or places that we know have been successful in helping people turn their lives around? It's work. Yeah. It's a lot of work, and it's all the time. You can never let up. You have to keep working at this aggressively. And it requires a lot of money and a lot of, overhead, because it's not like you can just do this on a machine. You can't, work from home in this arena. You have to do it. It's very hands-on. And there are safety challenges that exist with trying to do this work as well.
Why do you think it seems so much worse here than in a lot of cities? I mean, you hear all the time, I went to pick a city, and we didn't see as many homeless as we see here.
I don't know the answer to that, but I will say in my conversations with the people that I meet, I'm not saying that everyone doesn't come from San Francisco, but like the gentleman who was homeless for 20 years, he grew up in San Francisco. But I do meet a lot of people, and the first thing I ask, where are you from? And so there are a lot of folks that are from a lot of different places. This happens in a lot of major cities. I think part of the reason is San Francisco is a major city. It's a place that's easy to get drugs in, and we have a lot of people who families are coming to San Francisco to find their relatives from different parts of the country. It's a complex, challenging situation, and I think we have to do a better job in terms of making sure that we make it harder for people to get drugs, but also be honest about the fact that people suffer from addiction. And so having safe consumption sites and places for people to go so that it's not open and out on the streets is going to be also a part of the solution.
You know, one of the things your appointee to District 6, Matt Dorsey, has talked about is the need for sort of collaboration, for consensus, or at least for people to work together to tackle some of these really difficult challenges. The Chronicle just commissioned a poll that showed a lot of pessimism about the city, and I know as someone who's covered City Hall that there can be a lot of disagreements there, some toxicity.
But it wasn't, when you were there, was it as bad as it seems to be now?
Well, I don't know. And you tell me, you've been there the whole time, and what role do you play? What responsibility do you have to change that as mayor? Because you are the mayor, right?
So I'll tell you. Yeah, it's been hard because, I mean, as you know, like, for example, this board is a challenging board, and oftentimes,
I feel like every board's been a challenging board.
But this is different because at least with other boards, including the one that I served on, oftentimes there was at least we can come and have a seat at the table and have a conversation and negotiate.
That's
right?
not the case?
A lot of times it's a very all or nothing. The good news is that recently during this budget process, it was very collaborative. It was really how we should be working together every single time.
What was different?
I'm not sure what was different. I think that, there might be some, hearts and minds changed about things that they need to do for their districts that make it easier to be more collaborative with me than to fight to look like you're opposing the mayor. Like, that's what people do because they want to go to higher office. They want to be mayor. They want to run for something else. We don't have time for that right now. Like, run for mayor, who cares? But in the process, let's work together. Let's work together on these issues. And the budget process, it was the first time.
And you feel like you've offered that olive branch?
Oh, yes. My office, like I've said to members of the board, they can have a meeting anytime they want, even if it's the last minute, I will squeeze them in. They know how to reach me. They know how to get in touch with me. They do when they want something, right? Because that's when they come in my office and they give me this laundry list, but never talk about some of the other things that they kind of play out in the media. But that's like the game, right? And I don't get consumed by the game and all of that because I know what they're doing. I can't get consumed by that because it's not just about my district. It's about the whole city. I can't just take care of one group of people. I have to think about the impacts of the entire city of San Francisco. I don't have the luxury to do what members of the board do, the members of the board do. But what I hope is that, they would put aside some of their craziness and differences, which, let's be clear, not all of them. I don't want to just paint a broad brush of every member of the board, but I wish that they would just think more about the impacts of what they're doing and the amount of time they're investing in those things that are taking away from some of the more important things that we need to do as a city. I mean, when I put a certain proposition on the ballot, then they want to put a counter. Even
talking about the housing measures.
Yes, even though, like, we've tried this 4 times. We've talked about it. We discussed, like, compromise. It wasn't like I just threw it in anyone's face. It was like, how can I work with you? The answer was just no, right? So how do you work with that when the answer is just no? I have a responsibility to make things happen in the city. I mean, Proposition H for small businesses. The fact that I had to take that to the ballot, that could have been dealt with at the Board of Supervisors. Do we support small business or not? Do we support the ability for someone to go from a nail shop to an ice cream parlor? Why should that take 18 months to 2 years to do? It should take 30 days, and that's what it takes now because I went to voters to get that level of support. We should not be working like this.
We do want to take some audience questions, and I think if you have a card, somebody will collect it and get them probably to Marisa. One of the things that's important for a mayor, governor, president is accountability and oversight, and that's what the commissions are for. And in the last few weeks, it came.
You're going to talk about my letters?
Yeah. Tell us about the letters, London.
This is what I mean. Why are we focused on that? And when there's so many more important things to be focused on.
But so it came to light that there was one police commissioner who you wanted and required to sign one of these undated resignation letters so that you could use it when you saw fit. And it turns out there were almost 50 people who got these, including, I guess, Kamala Harris's niece and.
Mina, who's my friend, yes.
And, the district director for Nancy Pelosi. So, so initially.
Let's talk about this.
So initially your office kind of defended it, and they said, okay, we won't do it anymore. So what?
I wouldn't say that we defended it. I mean, let me just explain why I did it. When Ed Lee was mayor and there was this big episode with a commissioner on the port, Mel Murphy, there was a lot of drama around that, where this person wouldn't resign, wouldn't leave the commission, and it had an impact on business for this commission. So this is not about you vote the way I tell you to, and if you don't, I use a letter.
But they could think that.
Well, no, there's a conversation that happens as a result of this. My concern is if you go AWOL and we can't find you, which has happened, with some of our various committees where we've not been able to track down people who I appoint to serve in various capacities. After 3 months, if you're nowhere around, you're not showing up to meetings, you're not making a phone call, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about situations like this. And let's be clear, people don't know these commissioners. Guess who they're holding accountable for this work? They expect the mayor to deliver. And I can't even hire and fire the police chief directly. I have members of the Board of Supervisors, they have to approve my commissioners. And it's all these layers of process, but at the end of the day, who is this city counting on to make sure it's safe when I don't even have the direct authority to do exactly what I need to do to make it so in some instances? So for me, part of why we did what we did, and I take full responsibility for it because it was my decision, it was not an illegal thing to do, but it was necessary if I ever needed to use it, if I ever ran into a situation where someone's going AWOL, where someone, as a result of something that happened, like a Mel Murphy, we could use a letter like this. And if we ever did that, that would be made public. We wouldn't be hiding behind it. We wouldn't be saying, oh, you didn't vote a certain way and then put out that would create a whole nother set of issues.
But that's a practice that I don't think other mayors have done.
I don't know what other mayors done. They claim they haven't done it, but you know what? Other mayors, before some of the policies that have been put on the books by the Board of Supervisors, people like Willie Brown had direct ability to appoint commissioners on the police commission, and I don't. I have to go through the Board of Supervisors. MTA commissioners, they had a different level of authority than I have now, but I'm still being held accountable. I'm not going to be mayor forever. Any other mayor is going to have the responsibility. If we want to see things change, if we want things done, and you want to hold the mayor accountable and you want to see real change, you need the ability to be able to manage these various departments and the leaders of these departments. And having layers of commissioners sometimes can be an impediment to that.
Then why not keep the letters? Why not keep doing it?
Because it's just easier not to let this continue to blow up and be an issue, because this is a real insider political thing. The people who care about this are the people who, in most cases, just want to mess with me over something.
You mean the media?
No. The media likes messing with me over things, too. But, again, why do you think it's so important?
Well, because it implies that you want to have a level of control, and when their job is to oversee these departments and be independent.
I do want to have a level of control. That's not even a question, because I'm held accountable for it. I'm held responsible for it. Name all the commissioners on the police commission. Were they elected to be mayor?
Deborah Walker.
Name all of them.
I can't name all of them.
Yeah. Were they elected?
Veronese
Were they?
is
No, he's not on there
He's not.
anymore.
Okay, stop, Scott, stop. All right, we only got a few.
But
That doesn't mean you're right.
I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm just saying that my perspective is, yes, I want to have a layer of control so that I can manage the city, so that I can be able to deliver what people are asking me to do. But when I have people, again, that might have challenges that distract from the issue, that go AWOL with their attendance, that aren't showing up and think they can do whatever they want to do as it relates to, their duties of what they're supposed to be doing as a commissioner, then yeah, I need to do what I need to do because people hold me responsible for it. So it's really about that. And at the end of the day, people talk about independence from the mayor. We need independence from the mayor. Well, the mayor is elected. I don't care if it's me or anyone else. The mayor is elected by the majority of the people in this city, more so than any other member of the Board of Supervisors. Commissioners aren't even elected. The buck stops with me. I'm held accountable for all these things. People don't want to hear excuses. They want solutions. They want the city to get better. And part of making sure that that happens means some level of control and understanding that the people I put in positions for commissions are being responsible, are focusing on not their own personal agendas, but focusing on the agendas for the city, are listening to the community. And this commissioner that you mentioned wouldn't even listen to members of the Black community when they talked about some of the policies that he's trying to implement. So it's a bigger conversation here, and it needs to be, kind of brought out in this way. So it's not about being right or wrong. You of course have your feelings and opinions about it, and I know others do as well. But in the bigger scheme of things, for me, this is at the bottom of the list of things that I feel are the most important in our city.
All right, we only have a few minutes left, and let's end on a hopeful note. What are you most hopeful for?
No, I'll take some hard questions.
Want a hard question?
I got one.
Well, I do have. We could keep going. But seriously, this is from my audience, and I think it's a good one. What are you most hopeful about of the future in San Francisco? We've talked a lot about the problems and challenges. You've made clear that you believe you should be held accountable.
Yes.
What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is that, there are people who really care about this city. I think that, I've been meeting with a lot of folks in the city, especially during the election around, the DA is on the ballot, all these different ballot. But today gives me hope. When I was at this press conference with the police chief, the district attorney, and Matt Dorsey, who's a supervisor for District 6, who's a recovering addict, who's on the Board of Supervisors, who's working towards solutions. When we were at this press conference and we were talking about solutions and what we're going to do, and we were all working together, that gives me hope. It gives me hope when we have collaborations like that. It gives me hope when there are people who say, what can I do? Not just, complain about what's not happening, but how can I help? How can I be a part of the solution? Because people want to see San Francisco get better. And what gives me hope is folks who are, there are some people throwing up their hands and saying, we're leaving San Francisco. But then there are others who are just digging in their heels and saying, I believe in this city. I know what we stand for. I know what's possible. And it gives me hope. And I think the fact that I'm sitting here as mayor from the life that I grew up in, that I'm able to be here and to help make decisions and to help bring my experience into the conversation around the decisions that get made, that brings me hope because I know there are other people out there who feel the same way, who feel they want to be a part of that. So this city has been through challenges. We've been through, the AIDS crisis, the crack epidemic, 89 earthquake, 1906 earthquake, other pandemics before any of us were alive besides COVID. And look at what we were able to do, how we've been a national leader with the AIDS crisis, how the global pandemic, one of the lowest death rates, because we got rid of the mess and the bureaucracy and the politics and focused on what needed to be done to save lives. Like, I know what we're capable of. And that gives me hope for the future of this city. And as I said, I'm not going to be mayor forever. And the question is, how do we make sure that we set our city up for success? It's not just about a person. It's about our city structure. It's about how the people that we elect make the decisions and whether or not those decisions fall in line with doing what is in the best interest of the city. And my hope is that I can help to set the stage for making that a part of our future, so that we never end up in the situation like we are now with so many of those challenges, which appear, pretty problematic and overwhelming.
Well, we're rooting for all of you. We're both San Franciscans.
Well, before we say goodnight, we want to thank our producers, Ryan Davis and Lance Gardner from the KQED Live team, as well as Guy Marzorati from Political Breakdown. Mayor Breed, thank you so much for sharing your life and some of the issues you're dealing with as mayor. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, I like when it got spicy.